In a world where royal families across Europe struggle to maintain relevance, where scandals dominate headlines and public trust wavers with each passing controversy, something extraordinary happened in Britain. Against all odds, two individuals who once faced intense scrutiny, criticism, and doubt managed to capture the hearts of an entire nation. Their journey from being questioned figures to becoming the most beloved members of the royal family reads like a modern fairy tale, but this story is absolutely real. The numbers don't lie. Recent polls show approval ratings that would make any politician green with envy. Public appearances draw crowds that security teams struggle to manage. Social media engagement reaches millions within hours. But how did William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, achieve this remarkable transformation? How did they navigate personal tragedies, family conflicts, and public pressure to emerge stronger than ever? This is the untold story of resilience, authenticity, and the power of genuine connection in an age of manufactured celebrity. It's about two people who refused to let circumstances define them and instead chose to define their own legacy. Their rise to the top of popularity polls isn't just about royal protocol or carefully managed public relations campaigns. It's about real moments, genuine emotions, and a couple who learned to balance duty with humanity. From quiet acts of service that cameras never captured to spontaneous interactions that melted hearts worldwide, from navigating family crises with grace to championing causes that matter deeply to ordinary people, William and Catherine's story proves that authentic leadership still resonates in our cynical age. Their journey shows us that popularity built on genuine foundation lasts longer than any temporary media attention. What you're about to read will change how you think about modern royalty, public service, and the delicate dance between private life and public duty. This is their story, told through the eyes of those who witnessed their transformation firsthand. The morning sun cast long shadows across the gardens of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, reviewed the latest polling data with her private secretary. The numbers were remarkable, even surprising to those who worked closely with the royal couple. After years of building their reputation through quiet dedication and authentic public service, William and Catherine had achieved something that seemed impossible just a decade ago. They had become the most popular members of the British royal family, surpassing even the beloved late Queen Elizabeth in some demographic categories. The journey to this unprecedented level of public approval had not been smooth or predictable. When Catherine first appeared on the public stage as Prince William's girlfriend, the media scrutiny was intense and often brutal. Tabloid newspapers dissected every outfit choice, analyzed every public appearance, and speculated endlessly about the future of their relationship. The pressure was enormous, and many observers wondered if this young woman from a middle-class family could handle the weight of royal expectations. Those early years were marked by careful navigation of an unforgiving media landscape. Catherine faced criticism that seemed disproportionate and unfair. Some commentators questioned whether she had the substance necessary for royal duties, dismissing her as merely decorative. The nickname Weighty Katie became a cruel shorthand for perceived indecision about her future. Behind the scenes, however, Catherine was quietly preparing for a role that would eventually transform not just her own life, but the very perception of what modern royalty could be. The transformation began with small, deliberate choices that demonstrated depth beyond the surface glamour that initially attracted media attention. Catherine's decision to pursue photography seriously, her dedication to understanding child development through academic study, and her careful observation of how senior royals conducted their duties all contributed to building a foundation for future success. She understood that lasting respect could not be manufactured through public relations campaigns alone. Prince William faced his own unique challenges during this period. As the future king, every decision he made was scrutinized for what it might reveal about his character and his vision for the monarchy. The weight of his mother's legacy cast both inspiration and shadow over his developing public persona. Diana, Princess of Wales, had revolutionized royal engagement with the public, bringing unprecedented warmth and emotional connection to royal duties. William needed to honor that legacy while establishing his own authentic approach to public service. The couple's decision to spend several years living relatively quietly in Wales while William served as a helicopter pilot with the Royal Air Force Search and Rescue Force proved crucial to their later success. This period allowed them to develop their relationship away from constant London media attention, while William gained experience in genuine public service that had nothing to do with royal protocol. The work was dangerous and meaningful, requiring skills and dedication that could not be faked or performed for cameras. During rescue missions over the Irish Sea and Welsh mountains, William experienced firsthand the difference between ceremonial duty and life-or-death responsibility. He saved lives, comforted families in crisis, and worked alongside dedicated professionals who judged him entirely on his competence and character rather than his title. These experiences profoundly shaped his understanding of public service and gave him credibility that no amount of royal training could provide. Catherine used this time in Wales to deepen her understanding of the communities they would eventually serve. She volunteered with local organizations, attended community events without fanfare, and began developing the genuine connections with ordinary people that would become a hallmark of her later public work. Rather than viewing this period as preparation for her real role, she embraced it as valuable service in its own right. The couple's wedding in April 2011 marked a turning point in public perception. The ceremony struck a perfect balance between royal grandeur and accessible warmth. Catherine's choice to do her own makeup, her genuine emotion during the service, and the obvious love between the couple created a moment of national celebration that transcended traditional royal watching. For the first time in decades, a royal wedding felt like a genuine love story rather than a duty-bound arrangement. The global audience of nearly 2 billion people witnessed something authentic and hopeful. In a world increasingly cynical about institutions and traditional authority, William and Catherine represented possibility and renewal. Their obvious affection for each other, combined with their evident nervousness and joy, made them relatable in ways that surprised even experienced royal watchers. Following their marriage, the couple faced the challenge of defining their role as working royals while maintaining the authenticity that had made their courtship so compelling. They chose a path that emphasized substance over spectacle, focusing on causes that addressed real problems rather than simply raising awareness. Their approach to royal duties began to demonstrate that effective public service required more than good intentions and beautiful photographs. Catherine's focus on early childhood development emerged from genuine interest rather than assignment by palace officials. She spent months meeting with researchers, visiting programs, and understanding the science behind child development before making her first major speech on the topic. When she finally began speaking publicly about early years initiatives, her knowledge and passion were evident to experts in the field, earning respect that extended far beyond traditional royal supporters. William's work with conservation efforts and homelessness prevention similarly reflected deep personal commitment rather than dutiful obligation. His willingness to sleep rough on London streets to understand homelessness firsthand, and his hands-on involvement with African conservation projects, demonstrated a level of engagement that surprised critics who expected superficial celebrity involvement. The birth of their children marked another evolution in their public image. Rather than hiding behind royal protocol, William and Catherine chose to share selected moments of family life in ways that felt genuine rather than staged. Their obvious delight in parenthood, combined with their determination to provide their children with as normal an upbringing as possible given their circumstances, resonated powerfully with parents across Britain and beyond. Their approach to raising Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis reflected values that ordinary families could recognize and appreciate. The children were photographed doing normal activities, celebrating birthdays with homemade cakes, and enjoying outdoor adventures. Catherine's decision to take many of the family photographs herself, rather than relying exclusively on professional court photographers, added intimacy and authenticity to public glimpses of their family life. As the couple's confidence grew, so did their willingness to tackle controversial or difficult topics. William's outspoken advocacy for mental health awareness challenged traditional royal reluctance to address personal struggles publicly. His candid discussions of his own grief following his mother's death, and his acknowledgement of seeking professional help, broke new ground for royal transparency about emotional vulnerability. Catherine's support for this initiative was equally important. Her willingness to discuss the challenges of motherhood, including the isolation and pressure that many new mothers experience, created connections with women who had never felt personally invested in royal activities. These were not carefully scripted soundbites designed to generate positive coverage, but genuine reflections on shared human experiences. The couple's response to national crises also contributed to their growing popularity. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they adapted quickly to new ways of connecting with the public, hosting virtual meetings with frontline workers and finding creative ways to support community organizations when traditional royal visits were impossible. Their visible gratitude toward healthcare workers and essential workers felt genuine because it was accompanied by practical support rather than just ceremonial recognition. Their handling of family difficulties also demonstrated maturity and grace under pressure. When family tensions became public knowledge, William and Catherine maintained dignity while clearly communicating their own values and priorities. They refused to engage in public disputes but also did not allow others to define their positions or motivations. This balance between loyalty and independence impressed observers across the political spectrum. The polling data that Catherine reviewed that morning represented more than numbers on a page. It reflected years of patient work to build authentic connections with people from all walks of life. The approval ratings crossing demographic lines that had historically divided opinions about the monarchy. Young people who had previously shown little interest in royal activities were engaging with causes championed by William and Catherine. Parents appreciated their approach to child-rearing and education. Older generations respected their dedication to duty and service. Perhaps most significantly, the couple had managed to increase support for the monarchy itself among groups that had traditionally been skeptical. Their success was not just personal popularity but institutional strengthening. They had demonstrated that royal service could be both traditional and innovative, both dignified and approachable, both ceremonial and substantive. The foundation for their remarkable popularity had been laid through countless small decisions to choose authenticity over convenience, substance over spectacle, and genuine service over mere performance. As Catherine finished reviewing the morning's briefing materials, she understood that these numbers represented not an achievement to be celebrated, but a responsibility to be honored through continued dedication to the communities they served. The real test of their popularity would come not in polling data or media coverage, but in their ability to use public trust and affection to accomplish meaningful change in areas they cared about most. The numbers were gratifying, but the opportunity they represented was what truly mattered. Their journey from questioned newcomers to beloved public figures was remarkable, but it was only the beginning of what they hoped to accomplish together. The transformation of William and Catherine from dutiful royals to genuinely beloved public figures accelerated dramatically through their response to national and international crises that tested their character in ways no protocol manual could prepare them for. The true measure of their popularity emerged not from carefully staged events or positive media coverage, but from moments when the world watched them navigate unexpected challenges with grace, authenticity, and unwavering commitment to service. The terrorist attacks that struck London and Manchester during the mid-2010s provided the first major test of the couple's ability to comfort a nation in pain. When William and Catherine arrived at hospitals to visit victims and meet with families affected by the violence, their approach differed markedly from traditional royal condolence visits. Rather than maintaining formal distance, they sat on hospital beds, held hands with survivors, and listened to stories of loss and resilience with evident emotion. Catherine's interaction with the mother of a young victim became particularly memorable when she broke protocol to embrace the grieving woman who collapsed in tears while describing her daughter's final moments. The gesture was captured by photographers, but what impressed observers was Catherine's complete focus on providing comfort rather than managing her public image. She stayed with the family for twice the scheduled time, ignoring attempts by staff to maintain the official schedule. William's conversation with a teenage survivor who had lost his leg in one of the attacks revealed another dimension of their evolving approach to public service. Rather than offering platitudes about healing and moving forward, William shared his own experience of traumatic loss and the long journey of processing grief. The young man later told reporters that the prince's honesty about his ongoing struggles with his mother's death made him feel less alone in his own recovery process. These interactions demonstrated something that polling data could measure but not fully capture. William and Catherine had developed the ability to be genuinely present with people in their worst moments without making the encounter about themselves or their royal status. This skill, which combined emotional intelligence with authentic compassion, became a hallmark of their public service and a major factor in their growing popularity. The couple's response to the Grenfell Tower fire tragedy further solidified their reputation for meaningful engagement with communities in crisis. When they arrived at the site of the devastating apartment block fire that claimed 72 lives, they came prepared to listen rather than to be seen. William and Catherine spent hours meeting with survivors, emergency responders, and community leaders without any media presence, focusing entirely on understanding the scope of the tragedy and how they could most effectively help. Their decision to return repeatedly to the affected community, participating in memorial services and supporting long-term recovery efforts, demonstrated commitment that extended far beyond the initial crisis response. Catherine's work with displaced families, helping to coordinate temporary housing and support services, was conducted largely away from public attention. When details of her involvement eventually became known, it enhanced rather than diminished the impact because it was clear that helping had been the motivation rather than generating positive publicity. William's advocacy for fire safety improvements and building regulation reforms following Grenfell showed his willingness to engage with controversial political issues when public safety was at stake. His meetings with government officials and construction industry leaders to push for stronger safety standards put him at risk of criticism for overstepping traditional royal boundaries, but public opinion strongly supported his intervention on behalf of vulnerable residents. The couple's handling of international diplomatic challenges also contributed to their rising popularity by demonstrating sophisticated understanding of Britain's role in the world. Their tours of Commonwealth nations and European countries consistently generated positive coverage not just for their charm and style, but for their substantive engagement with complex political and economic issues. During a particularly sensitive visit to Pakistan, a country with complicated historical ties to Britain, William and Catherine navigated cultural differences and political tensions with remarkable skill. Catherine's choice to wear clothing by Pakistani designers, combined with her respectful participation in religious and cultural ceremonies, demonstrated thoughtful preparation and genuine respect for their hosts. The images of her playing cricket with children in a Lahore community centre became symbols of positive engagement that transcended political boundaries. William's discussions with Pakistani officials about climate change and economic development showed depth of knowledge that impressed diplomatic observers. Rather than limiting himself to ceremonial appearances, he engaged in detailed conversations about water scarcity, agricultural challenges, and regional security issues. His ability to ask informed questions and offer relevant insights based on Britain's own experiences with similar challenges elevated the visit beyond traditional royal diplomacy. The couple's response to family crises also played a crucial role in their growing popularity. When Prince Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties, the intense media scrutiny and public speculation created a challenging situation that could have damaged public perception of the entire royal family. William and Catherine's response demonstrated emotional maturity and institutional loyalty while maintaining personal dignity. Rather than engaging in public criticism or defensive explanations, they focused on continuing their own work while expressing private support for Harry and Meghan's right to make their own choices. Their statements about family relationships being complicated and requiring ongoing work resonated with many people who had experienced their own family difficulties. The contrast between their measured response and the media frenzy surrounding the situation actually enhanced their reputation for stability and wisdom. Catherine's role in maintaining family relationships during this difficult period particularly impressed observers. Her efforts to facilitate communication between William and Harry, and her warm public interactions with other family members, demonstrated diplomatic skills that suggested strong potential for future leadership roles. The fact that she managed to support her husband while maintaining relationships across family divisions showed emotional intelligence that many people found admirable. The COVID-19 pandemic provided perhaps the most significant test of William and Catherine's ability to adapt their approach to royal service while maintaining meaningful connections with the public. When traditional royal engagements became impossible due to public health restrictions, they quickly developed new ways to fulfill their roles and support communities in crisis. Their rapid adoption of video calling technology to maintain contact with charities, schools, and community organizations initially seemed like a temporary accommodation to unusual circumstances. However, their natural ease with the technology and their ability to create genuine connections through virtual meetings revealed new possibilities for royal engagement that had not previously been explored. Catherine's virtual reading sessions for children stuck at home during lockdown became wildly popular, not just because of the novelty of a princess reading bedtime stories over video chat, but because of her obvious enjoyment and natural storytelling ability. Parents reported that their children looked forward to these sessions and often requested repeat viewings. The initiative began as a simple way to support early childhood education during school closures but evolved into a genuine connection point between the royal family and ordinary families. William's video calls with healthcare workers, teachers, and small business owners during the pandemic revealed his ability to have meaningful conversations about difficult topics without the formal structure of traditional royal visits. His discussions about mental health challenges during lockdown, financial stress, and family pressures were notable for their depth and authenticity. Healthcare workers particularly appreciated his acknowledgement of their sacrifice and his genuine interest in their well-being beyond ceremonial thank you messages. The couple's decision to personally deliver food packages to vulnerable community members during lockdown, often without media coverage, demonstrated their commitment to direct service rather than symbolic gestures. When photographs of these activities eventually surfaced, usually taken by grateful recipients rather than official photographers, the impact was enhanced by the obvious spontaneity and genuine care shown in the interactions. Their virtual engagement with international partners during the pandemic also showcased diplomatic skills that exceeded traditional expectations for royal involvement in foreign relations. William's participation in global climate change discussions and Catherine's collaboration with international early childhood development experts demonstrated their ability to contribute substantively to important global conversations rather than merely representing British interests ceremonially. The couple's response to vaccine hesitancy in certain communities provided another example of their willingness to use their platform for public benefit even when it involved potential controversy. Their decision to receive COVID-19 vaccinations publicly, combined with their conversations with community leaders about vaccine safety and effectiveness, helped address concerns in communities where trust in government health messages was limited. Catherine's particular engagement with minority communities that had been disproportionately affected by the pandemic demonstrated cultural sensitivity and genuine commitment to equity. Her visits to community centers in areas with large immigrant populations, and her participation in cultural events that celebrated diversity while promoting public health, showed understanding of complex social dynamics that impressed community leaders. The polling data reflecting their rising popularity during this period captured public appreciation for leadership that combined traditional royal dignity with modern adaptability and authentic concern for public welfare. Their ability to maintain relevance and effectiveness during unprecedented circumstances suggested that their approach to royal service was resilient and forward-thinking. Perhaps most importantly, their success during national and international crises demonstrated that their popularity was not dependent on favorable circumstances or careful image management. When tested by genuine challenges that required real leadership rather than ceremonial performance, William and Catherine consistently demonstrated the character traits that had initially attracted public support. Their rising poll numbers reflected not temporary approval but growing confidence in their ability to serve effectively in whatever circumstances they might face in the future. The evolution of William and Catherine's public image reached a critical turning point through their groundbreaking work in mental health advocacy, an area where their personal experiences intersected with pressing national needs in ways that transformed both public perception and actual policy outcomes. Their decision to speak openly about psychological struggle and emotional well-being challenged centuries of royal reserve while establishing them as leaders in one of the most important public health conversations of their generation. The foundation for this transformation began with William's gradual acknowledgement of his own mental health journey following his mother's death. Initially, his references to grief and loss were carefully controlled and limited to appropriate ceremonial contexts. However, as he matured and gained confidence in his public role, his willingness to discuss psychological challenges became more detailed and personal, breaking new ground for royal transparency about emotional vulnerability. The turning point came during a speech at a mental health conference where William departed from his prepared remarks to describe the specific impact of trauma on his own development. Rather than speaking in general terms about the importance of mental health support, he detailed his experience of suppressing grief for years, the cost of that suppression on his relationships and personal growth, and the eventual necessity of seeking professional help to process emotions he had avoided confronting. The response to this level of personal disclosure was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Mental health professionals praised his courage in discussing topics that remain stigmatized despite growing awareness. Young people, particularly those who had experienced their own trauma, expressed gratitude for his honesty about struggling with emotions that society often expected them to handle privately. The speech generated more sustained media coverage and public discussion about mental health than any previous royal initiative. Catherine's contribution to this evolving conversation proved equally significant, though her approach differed from William's direct personal disclosure. Her focus on maternal mental health and the psychological challenges of early parenthood resonated with millions of women who had experienced similar struggles but felt unable to discuss them openly due to social expectations about motherhood and female strength. Her candid discussions about postnatal anxiety, the isolation that many new mothers experience, and the pressure to appear constantly happy and fulfilled challenged unrealistic expectations that contributed to widespread maternal mental health problems. Catherine's willingness to admit that motherhood had been more difficult than anticipated, despite having significant support and resources, gave permission for other women to acknowledge their own struggles without shame. The couple's decision to establish the Mental Health Initiative Heads Together represented a sophisticated understanding of how their platform could be used to create lasting change rather than temporary awareness. Rather than simply lending their names to existing organizations, they invested significant time in understanding the landscape of mental health services, identifying gaps in provision, and developing strategies that addressed systemic problems. Their research process involved months of private meetings with mental health professionals, service users, and family members affected by psychological illness. William and Catherine attended support group sessions as observers, visited psychiatric facilities, and participated in training sessions designed to help them understand different approaches to mental health treatment. This preparation ensured that their eventual public advocacy was informed by genuine expertise rather than good intentions alone. The launch of Heads Together coincided with their decision to make mental health their primary charitable focus, bringing unprecedented resources and attention to organizations that had traditionally struggled for recognition and funding. Their involvement attracted corporate sponsorship, government attention, and media coverage that transformed public conversation about psychological well-being from niche concern to mainstream priority. Catherine's particular focus on perinatal mental health led to tangible policy changes that affected thousands of women across Britain. Her advocacy for improved screening during pregnancy and after birth, combined with her support for specialized mother and baby psychiatric units, contributed to increased government investment in maternal mental health services. The fact that these changes could be directly attributed to her involvement demonstrated the potential for royal advocacy to produce concrete benefits rather than symbolic gestures. William's work with military veterans experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder brought attention to psychological casualties of military service that had previously received inadequate recognition and support. His participation in veterans therapy sessions, his advocacy for improved transition support for service members returning to civilian life, and his challenge to military culture that discouraged seeking help for psychological injuries created new opportunities for thousands of veterans to access appropriate care. The couple's approach to mental health advocacy also demonstrated their understanding of how their personal brand could be leveraged to reduce stigma and encourage help-seeking behavior. Their participation in therapeutic activities, their visible comfort with mental health professionals, and their repeated emphasis on seeking help as a sign of strength rather than weakness contributed to measurable increases in people contacting mental health services. Their decision to bring their children into age-appropriate mental health conversations also broke new ground for royal family transparency. When Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were photographed participating in activities designed to promote emotional well-being and resilience, it sent powerful messages about the importance of psychological health from early childhood. These images of royal children engaged in mindfulness exercises or discussing feelings challenged traditional expectations about emotional expression and mental toughness. The success of their mental health advocacy opened doors for William and Catherine to address other previously taboo topics that affected public well-being. Catherine's discussion of addiction as a mental health issue rather than a moral failing helped reduce stigma around substance abuse treatment. William's advocacy for suicide prevention, including his participation in campaigns targeting young men who were statistically most at risk, brought urgent attention to preventable tragedies. Their willingness to engage with controversial aspects of mental health care, including discussions about psychiatric medication, involuntary treatment, and family impact of mental illness, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of complex issues that many public figures avoided. Rather than limiting themselves to safe, uncontroversial aspects of mental health promotion, they tackled difficult questions about balancing individual autonomy with public safety and family well-being. The international impact of their mental health work also contributed to their rising global profile and domestic popularity. Their participation in World Health Organization initiatives, their collaboration with mental health advocates in other countries, and their hosting of international conferences on psychological well-being established them as global leaders in this area rather than merely British advocates. Catherine's work with early childhood mental health gained particular international recognition when her research collaboration with leading developmental psychologists produced new insights into the relationship between early emotional experiences and lifelong psychological well-being. Her contribution to academic conferences and peer-reviewed publications demonstrated intellectual engagement that surprised critics who had underestimated her scholarly capacity. William's advocacy for workplace mental health, including his challenge to corporate cultures that contributed to employee psychological distress, brought attention to systemic issues that affected millions of workers but had received limited high-profile advocacy. His meetings with business leaders, his participation in workplace mental health training, and his support for policy changes that protected employee psychological well-being demonstrated understanding of how mental health intersected with economic and social policy. The couple's response to mental health crises during the COVID-19 pandemic further solidified their reputation for meaningful leadership in this area. Their rapid adaptation of mental health programming for pandemic conditions, their advocacy for psychological support for frontline workers, and their attention to the mental health impact of lockdown measures on vulnerable populations showed agility and genuine concern for community well-being. Their virtual mental health support sessions during lockdown, their advocacy for continued funding of psychological services during economic pressure, and their attention to the specific mental health needs of different demographic groups demonstrated comprehensive understanding of how crisis conditions affected psychological well-being across society. These efforts contributed directly to maintaining mental health service provision when it might otherwise have been reduced due to competing priorities. The polling data reflecting their popularity during this period showed particular strength among demographics that had previously been less supportive of royal institutions. Young adults, who traditionally showed limited interest in monarchy, expressed strong approval for William and Catherine's mental health advocacy. Parents appreciated their approach to children's emotional well-being. Healthcare professionals respected their informed engagement with mental health issues. Perhaps most significantly, people with personal experience of mental illness, either their own or family members, expressed unprecedented levels of trust and appreciation for royal family members who had demonstrated genuine understanding and authentic commitment to psychological well-being. This represented a complete transformation from traditional royal approaches to health issues, which typically involved ceremonial support rather than substantive advocacy. The success of their mental health work established William and Catherine as more than popular royal figures. They became trusted voices on issues that affected nearly every family in Britain. Their ability to combine personal authenticity with policy advocacy, emotional intelligence with practical solutions, and royal platform with genuine expertise created new possibilities for how monarchy could contribute to social progress. Their rising popularity during this period reflected not just approval for their personalities or style, but confidence in their capacity to use their influence effectively for public benefit. The mental health advocacy demonstrated that their appeal was based on substance rather than superficiality, creating a foundation for sustained public support that could weather temporary controversies or changing circumstances. The remarkable surge in William and Catherine's popularity reached new heights through their innovative approach to environmental conservation and social justice, areas where they demonstrated an ability to bridge generational divides while addressing urgent contemporary challenges. Their environmental advocacy, in particular, showed how royal influence could be channeled towards solving global problems rather than maintaining traditional ceremonial functions, earning them respect from previously skeptical constituencies while maintaining support from traditional royal watchers. William's environmental consciousness had deep personal roots, stemming from his father's early advocacy for sustainable practices and his own experiences in African conservation work during his gap year before university. However, his approach to environmental issues as a senior royal differed significantly from previous royal environmental advocacy. Rather than focusing primarily on countryside preservation or traditional conservation, William embraced the urgent realities of climate change and the need for systemic transformation of energy, transportation, and economic systems. The Earthshot Prize, launched by William in 2020, represented perhaps the most ambitious and innovative royal initiative of the modern era. Rather than establishing another traditional charity or supporting existing environmental organizations, the prize created a completely new model for incentivizing and funding environmental innovation on a global scale. The initiative committed to awarding £5 million prizes annually for a decade to solutions that could help repair and regenerate the planet. The development of Earthshot required William to engage deeply with environmental science, technology innovation, and global economics in ways that challenged traditional royal roles. His preparation involved extensive consultation with climate scientists, renewable energy experts, sustainable agriculture specialists, and environmental justice advocates. The conversations were not ceremonial briefings but substantive exchanges that influenced both the structure of the prize and William's own understanding of environmental challenges. Catherine's contribution to the couple's environmental work focused particularly on the intersection between environmental health and child development, an area where her expertise in early years advocacy combined with growing awareness of how environmental factors affected children's physical and cognitive development. Her research into the impact of air pollution on learning capacity, the relationship between access to green space and childhood obesity, and the psychological benefits of nature connection for young people added important dimensions to environmental advocacy. Her collaboration with pediatric health researchers to document how environmental degradation disproportionately affected children from disadvantaged backgrounds brought social justice perspectives to environmental advocacy that had sometimes been criticized as primarily benefiting affluent communities. Catherine's work highlighted how environmental protection was essential for educational equality and children's rights, not just wildlife preservation or aesthetic concerns. The couple's joint advocacy for environmental education in schools represented another innovation in royal engagement with policy issues. Rather than simply supporting existing environmental education programs, they worked with educators and curriculum specialists to develop new approaches that made environmental science accessible and relevant to students from diverse backgrounds. Their involvement in pilot programs and teacher training sessions demonstrated hands-on commitment that impressed education professionals. William's participation in global climate conferences, including substantive speaking roles at events where royal family members had traditionally played only ceremonial functions, established him as a serious participant in international environmental policy discussions. His speeches at these events were notable for their specific policy recommendations, detailed knowledge of technological solutions, and frank acknowledgement of the urgency required to address climate change effectively. His decision to use royal tours and state visits to highlight environmental challenges in different regions showed sophisticated understanding of how royal diplomacy could advance environmental cooperation. During visits to Caribbean nations threatened by sea level rise, Pacific islands facing climate displacement, and African countries experiencing desertification and water scarcity, William's focus on environmental impacts elevated these issues in bilateral discussions and media coverage. Catherine's environmental work with urban communities, particularly her initiatives to increase access to green spaces in disadvantaged neighborhoods, demonstrated understanding of environmental justice issues that had received limited royal attention previously. Her collaboration with community organizations to create urban gardens, outdoor learning spaces, and nature-based therapy programs showed how environmental advocacy could address social inequality while promoting ecological sustainability. The couple's personal choices also contributed to their environmental credibility in ways that previous royal environmental advocacy had sometimes lacked. Their decision to limit their family size partly due to environmental concerns, their adoption of renewable energy systems at their residences, and their reduction of air travel for personal trips showed willingness to make personal sacrifices that aligned with their public advocacy. Their approach to royal tour transportation, including the use of commercial flights when possible and carbon offset programs for necessary private travel, addressed criticism that royal environmental advocacy was undermined by lavish travel practices. While they could not eliminate the security and logistical requirements that necessitated special travel arrangements, their efforts to minimize environmental impact were noticed and appreciated by environmental advocates. The integration of environmental themes into traditional royal events also demonstrated creativity in using established royal platforms to advance conservation messages. Catherine's choice of sustainable fashion for major public appearances, their use of locally sourced and organic food at royal receptions, and their incorporation of environmental themes into children's birthday celebrations showed how environmental consciousness could be woven into royal traditions without abandoning their cultural significance. Their work with young environmental activists, including meetings with school climate strike participants and collaboration with youth-led environmental organizations, showed willingness to learn from and amplify voices that had sometimes been critical of traditional institutions. Rather than dismissing young environmental activists as disruptive or naive, William and Catherine engaged seriously with their concerns and provided platforms for their messages. The international recognition of their environmental work, including awards from environmental organizations and invitations to participate in global environmental initiatives, enhanced their credibility as environmental leaders while raising Britain's profile in international environmental cooperation. Their ability to attract international attention and resources for environmental projects demonstrated the soft power potential of engaged royal environmental advocacy. Their response to environmental disasters also showcased their ability to balance sympathy and comfort with substantive advocacy for prevention and adaptation. Following flooding events in Britain, their visits to affected communities combined traditional royal consolation with discussions about climate adaptation and flood prevention infrastructure. Their meetings with farmers affected by extreme weather events included conversations about sustainable agriculture and climate resilience. Catherine's particular attention to the mental health impacts of environmental disasters and climate anxiety, especially among young people, created new connections between her psychological health advocacy and environmental work. Her recognition that climate change was creating psychological distress for many children and young adults led to development of support programs that addressed both environmental education and emotional well-being. William's advocacy for biodiversity conservation, including his support for rewilding projects and wildlife protection initiatives, connected traditional conservation interests with climate change solutions in ways that appealed to both environmentalists and countryside communities. His understanding of how ecosystem restoration could contribute to carbon sequestration while supporting rural economies showed sophisticated grasp of connections between environmental and economic policy. The couple's collaboration with indigenous communities on environmental protection and traditional ecological knowledge represented another dimension of their evolving approach to environmental advocacy. Their recognition that indigenous peoples were often the most effective guardians of biodiversity and their advocacy for indigenous land rights showed understanding of connections between environmental protection and social justice that had sometimes been overlooked by mainstream environmental movements. Their success in attracting corporate support for environmental initiatives, through both the Earthshot Prize and other environmental projects, demonstrated ability to leverage royal influence for practical environmental progress. Their engagement with business leaders about sustainable practices, renewable energy investment, and environmental innovation showed understanding of how economic incentives could drive environmental solutions. The polling data reflecting their environmental advocacy showed particularly strong support among young adults and university-educated populations who had traditionally been less interested in royal activities. Environmental organizations that had previously been critical of royal lifestyles expressed appreciation for substantive environmental leadership. International environmental advocates recognized their contribution to global environmental cooperation. Perhaps most importantly, their environmental work established them as forward-thinking leaders who understood contemporary challenges and were willing to use their platform for urgent problem-solving rather than maintaining traditional ceremonial functions. Their popularity during this period reflected public appreciation for leadership that addressed real-world problems while maintaining the dignity and effectiveness that people expected from senior royals. The environmental advocacy also demonstrated their ability to evolve their royal roles in response to changing global circumstances while maintaining public support across diverse constituencies. Their rising popularity during this period reflected not just approval for their environmental positions, but confidence in their capacity to provide meaningful leadership on complex contemporary challenges that required both moral authority and practical expertise. The culmination of William and Catherine's journey to unprecedented popularity came through their masterful handling of institutional modernization while preserving the essential dignity and continuity that made the monarchy meaningful to millions of people across Britain and the Commonwealth. Their ability to balance innovation with tradition, accessibility with authority, and personal authenticity with public duty created a new model for royal service that secured their position as the most beloved members of the royal family while strengthening the institution itself. The transition period following Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022 provided the ultimate test of William and Catherine's capacity for leadership during institutional change. As the new Prince and Princess of Wales, they inherited titles that carried immense historical significance and public expectation. Their response to this responsibility demonstrated the maturity and wisdom that had developed through years of careful preparation and authentic public service. Their approach to assuming these new roles differed markedly from traditional royal transitions. Rather than emphasizing the ceremonial aspects of their elevated status, they focused immediately on the service opportunities that their new positions created. Catherine's first major speech as Princess of Wales addressed early childhood development policy with the same depth and expertise that had characterized her previous work, while acknowledging the additional platform and responsibility that her new title provided. William's evolution into the role of heir apparent showed remarkable confidence and vision for the future of the monarchy. His speeches during this period outlined a modernized approach to royal service that maintained respect for tradition while embracing necessary changes for contemporary relevance. His emphasis on the monarchy as a force for unity during social division, as a voice for environmental urgency, and as a source of stability during global uncertainty resonated with people who had previously questioned the institution's relevance. The couple's handling of their expanded Commonwealth responsibilities particularly demonstrated their understanding of how royal influence could be used to strengthen international relationships during a period of global political tension. Their tours of Commonwealth nations as the new Prince and Princess of Wales combined traditional diplomatic functions with substantive engagement on issues of mutual concern, from climate change adaptation to youth education and economic development. Catherine's work with Commonwealth women's organizations, particularly her focus on maternal health and girls' education in developing nations, showed how her established expertise could be applied on a global scale. Her collaboration with local leaders, her willingness to learn from different cultural approaches to challenges she had addressed in Britain, and her advocacy for increased investment in women's empowerment demonstrated sophisticated understanding of international development. William's environmental diplomacy during Commonwealth visits created new models for how royal tours could advance policy cooperation rather than merely maintaining ceremonial relationships. His participation in renewable energy project launches, his meetings with indigenous leaders about conservation, and his advocacy for climate adaptation funding showed how royal influence could be leveraged for urgent global problem solving. Their approach to Commonwealth youth engagement, including the creation of new exchange programs and leadership development initiatives, demonstrated understanding of how royal relationships could evolve to serve emerging generations rather than simply preserving historical connections. Their recognition that Commonwealth relevance required addressing contemporary challenges while honoring shared heritage showed strategic thinking about institutional sustainability. The domestic impact of their new roles was equally significant. Their increased visibility as the future king and queen consort brought additional attention to all their activities, creating opportunities to amplify causes they had long supported while taking on new responsibilities that came with their elevated status. Their ability to manage this transition while maintaining the authenticity that had made them popular showed remarkable skill in navigating institutional pressure. Catherine's evolution into a future queen consort role particularly impressed observers who had watched her careful development over more than a decade of royal service. Her increased confidence in addressing controversial topics, her sophisticated understanding of policy complexities, and her ability to balance multiple high-profile initiatives while maintaining family priorities showed preparation and capability that exceeded many expectations. Her address to the nation during a particularly difficult period of economic uncertainty demonstrated rhetorical skill and emotional intelligence that commanded respect across political divides. Rather than offering platitudes or avoiding difficult realities, she acknowledged genuine challenges while articulating a vision of community resilience and mutual support that inspired many people who were struggling with financial pressure and social anxiety. William's preparation for eventual kingship became evident through his increased involvement in constitutional functions and his growing influence on government policy discussions. His participation in state visits, his consultation role in major national decisions, and his representation of British interests in international forums showed readiness for expanded responsibilities while maintaining the collaborative approach that had characterized his earlier royal service. Their joint work on institutional reform within the royal family itself demonstrated commitment to modernization that served public interest rather than institutional convenience. Their advocacy for streamlined royal finances, reduced ceremonial expenditure, and increased transparency in royal operations showed understanding that public support required responsible stewardship of resources and clear demonstration of value for taxpayer investment. The couple's handling of family relationships during this period of institutional change also contributed to their continued popularity. Their support for King Charles III and Queen Camilla while maintaining their own distinct approach to royal service showed loyalty and wisdom that impressed observers across generations. Their ability to honor family hierarchy while advocating for necessary changes demonstrated political skill that suggested effective future leadership. Their response to media scrutiny during this transition period particularly demonstrated the communication skills and strategic thinking that had developed throughout their relationship. Rather than avoiding difficult questions or relying entirely on official statements, they found ways to address public concerns while maintaining appropriate privacy boundaries. Their selective engagement with media, their use of social platforms for direct communication, and their strategic timing of announcements showed sophisticated understanding of contemporary communication requirements. The international recognition of their leadership during this period, including invitations to participate in global forums and bilateral discussions that traditionally involved heads of government rather than royal family members, demonstrated the respect they had earned through years of substantive engagement with important issues. Their ability to represent British interests effectively while maintaining personal authenticity created new opportunities for royal diplomacy. Their continued focus on the causes that had originally attracted public support, even as their responsibilities expanded dramatically, showed commitment to the service approach that had made them popular. Catherine's ongoing work in early childhood development, despite increased ceremonial obligations, demonstrated that her advocacy had been genuine rather than opportunistic. William's continued environmental leadership, despite pressure to focus on traditional royal functions, showed principled commitment to urgent global challenges. The polling data that reflected their peak popularity during this period captured public confidence not just in their personal qualities, but in their vision for the future of royal service and constitutional monarchy. Their approval ratings reflected trust that they would use their expanded influence responsibly while maintaining the values and approaches that had earned initial public support. Perhaps most significantly, their success in modernizing royal service while maintaining institutional stability demonstrated that progressive change and traditional authority were not incompatible when managed with wisdom and authenticity. Their popularity represented public confidence that the monarchy could evolve to serve contemporary needs while preserving the continuity and dignity that made it valuable. The journey from questioned newcomers to the most beloved members of the royal family culminated in recognition that William and Catherine had not simply adapted to royal expectations, but had transformed royal service itself. Their popularity reflected appreciation not just for their personal qualities, but for their demonstration that ancient institutions could address modern challenges when led by people committed to service, authenticity, and meaningful engagement with the communities they served. Their story proved that lasting popularity could not be manufactured through public relations or inherited through title alone, but had to be earned through consistent demonstration of character, competence, and genuine concern for public welfare. The polling numbers that had seemed remarkable at the beginning of their journey as Prince and Princess of Wales represented not the peak of their achievement, but the foundation for expanded service that would define their legacy and shape the future of the monarchy for generations to come.